Are you tired of just using your starter Warframe all the time? If yes, then you've come to exactly the right place, because in this Warframe guide, I'm gonna show you the best Warframes for beginners and newer players in general. But not just that, we're also going to talk about where and how exactly to get them, some tips to speed that up, as well as how to play them and which early game mod setups you can use to buff up your builds, making you decisively more powerful and self-sufficient than most other early game players. Quite a lot on our list today, so without further ado, let's jump right into it. And jumping into it, we do with probably the most prominent early game frame and every beginner's best friend. Of course, I'm talking about the one, the only, Rhino. Rhino is a meme, and he's definitely not uncontroversial, with criticism often coming from more advanced players. However, despite all of this, there is a reason why you see so many rookie Tenno rocking their Rhino, and I personally totally understand that. Here's why. Being dropped by the Jekyll on Venus, Rhino will most likely be the first Warframe in your playthrough that you'll own the entire blueprint set of, that being chassis, gear optics, and system, making him simply a logical choice to build. And once you play him then, you'll quickly realize this dude doesn't take any prisoners. Why is this, you may ask? Well, first of all, because of his second and probably most popular ability, Iron Skin. Iron Skin coats Rhino in a protective layer of metal, which works like an overshield, absorbing all incoming damage so that you don't take a single scratch. The fun thing here is that this effect has no limits to its duration, meaning your Iron Skin will remain up until its hit points are completely depleted. And speaking from my own experience as an early game Rhino player myself, especially in the first half of the star chart, it can very well be that the enemy does not manage to shoot down your Iron Skin at all till the very end of the mission, making you effectively completely invincible. And even if it breaks, well, you just go and recast it. Now, sure, as you progress and enemies grow stronger, this dynamic changes and Iron Skin becomes less OP. However, in case you really enjoy this playstyle, you'll be pleased to hear that it is very much possible to mod Rhino in a way that your Iron Skin remains competitive even in the very late game content. But we're not talking about late game here today, so long story short, Rhino's Iron Skin is basically God mode in the early game. But if you think that's already it, then oh boy, you're mistaken. Besides this obviously very strong skill, Rhino's third ability, Roar, is being held in high regards among players of all levels for its insane damage buff potential. What it does is essentially boost the damage output of you and your teammates for some time. What the description does not mention, however, is that this damage buff is not being counted as a standard base damage buff like the mod Serration would be, but is actually being treated as a so-called faction damage bonus. I don't want to go too deep into all the numerical shenanigans that are going on beyond the surface here, because as a beginner, you simply do not have to know all of this. But simply put, the thing is this. The actual damage increase after casting Roar is very much higher in practice than the numbers in your skill description on paper might suggest. Meaning with Iron Skin and Roar alone, you're already able to face tank all early game dangers while at the same time buffing up your damage output whenever you're in a tight spot. But now that we know what Rhino can do and how you want to play him, you might be wondering which mods we can use to make him more powerful so he can hold his own against higher level enemies. And gladly, with Rhino, like with all other frames on today's list, you don't need a strong or even a full mod setup to make him work. For Rhino, it's pretty simple and straightforward. The more ability strength you have, the stronger your Iron Skin and your damage buff through Roar will be. So if you happen to have any mods of these right here, make sure to slap them on. Also, Steel Fiber works real wonders on Rhino because it too increases the strength of your Iron Skin, and it is also very easy to get your hands on. If you happen to have any mods to increase your ability efficiency to make your skills cheaper to cast, absolutely go for it. And if you want your Roar to last longer, a bit of duration might also not hurt, albeit not that important. Also, given your Iron Skin, shields and health might not be that high on your priority list either with Rhino, however, that's completely up to your preference. So, with all that out of the way, there's only one question left to answer. While you're fully able to get all necessary blueprints for Rhino on the second planet already, some of the resources you'll need to actually build him are nowhere to be found that early on. That being salvage with the earliest farming spot on Mars, and plastids that can't be accessed before Phobos. So, does that mean we'll simply have to wait until then to get our Rhino? Of course, no. Here's my not-so-secret trick, and I have to make it very clear here, this is not hard to pull off. This is not cheating, it is not frowned upon by the community, and it is completely okay to do it. While you might not have unlocked those planets yet, that does not mean you cannot access them. You simply gotta be in a squad with another player who has unlocked them, so you get pulled right into the mission with them when they start them. So all you gotta do is go to the recruit chat and ask for a taxi to that certain planet you need the resources of. I personally recommend Jupiter and Uranus because they'll give you all the resources that you'll need for Rhino that are not accessible at the very start, and I'm sure you'll quickly find a nice tenno to help you out with this. In general, if you're new to the game, chances are you're having quite some questions, and making these guides for you, helping you get into the game is my absolute passion, but it takes quite some time. So I'd be super happy if you could spare a like to help me out with the YouTube gods, or maybe even think about joining the crew to never miss out on fresh tutorials. Cheers for that, but let's get back to the video. And getting back we do with one of the absolute top girls in the game, Zephyr. Zephyr might not be a Warframe you'd expect on a best beginner Warframes list, but trust me, you'll see that she's an absolute powerhouse. First of all, just like Rhino, Zephyr also comes with a skill that makes her almost immortal. Her third ability, Turbulence, surrounds you with a protective windshield that redirects all incoming fire away from you. Of course, that just includes bullets, lasers, and other types of standard projectiles, still leaving you vulnerable to explosions, melee, and so on, but let's be real here for a sec, not taking any ranged damage is a huge deal in keeping you safe. But being untouchable from range is definitely not the only quality that Zephyr brings to the table, because she is an absolute crowd control machine. With her second skill, Airburst, you can either pull enemies together in one spot by tapping the skill, or send them flying off in all directions by holding the button. Great to give you some breathing space if you're being overwhelmed by, say, a bunch of infested, and at the same time amazing to pull enemies towards you to deal damage to them. The real deal here, however, is the synergy with her fourth skill, Tornado. Tornado creates a number of tornadoes that engulf enemies and, here's the catch, all damage and all status effects that you deal to those tornadoes is being dealt to all enemies in all of your tornadoes. Meaning this enables you to easily obliterate huge amounts of foes in just one swoop. So what you want to do is basically create the tornadoes, use Airburst to pull all the enemies in the area into them, and then unload everything you have into the blob. In case you're running a weapon that does a lot of damage over time status effects like slash, heat, toxin, or electricity, these enemy blobs will melt away even faster then. All the while you're of course completely untouchable from range due to your skill Turbulence. The only problem here you might face though is energy. While everything I said about Zephyr totally holds true, compared to other Warframes like for example Rhino, she is quite the caster frame, thus heavily relying on the continuous execution of your abilities. And this of course costs quite the energy to sustain. Energy you might not have at the earlier stages of the game where you'll lack powerful mods and equipment pieces that help you supply it. So let's look into which beginner-friendly mods we can run here to get the most out of her in the early game. First of all, we want to use as many mods to increase our ability duration as we possibly can. Having our Turbulence and Tornadoes up for longer means we're not having to recast them as often, thus saving energy. Next, we double down into saving energy by going for more ability efficiency. If you own the mod Flow, then also absolutely go for it. More energy to work with is great to have for every caster type frame. And lastly, if you happen to have any mods up your arsenal through increased ability range, then these might also come in handy, helping you to suck in even more enemies with your skills. At the end of the day, Zephyr surely is one of the more demanding beginner frames when it comes to the required mod setup to make her truly powerful. However, she is also the only frame on today's list that I personally would classify a top 10 pick throughout the entire game, even into the highest level endgame activities. So surely an investment worthwhile. And speaking about investment, where do we get her now? On the one hand, she's actually really easy to acquire. On the other hand, however, I can already see the angry comments down below, because Zephyr is a clan exclusive, meaning you'll get all her blueprints, without farming, straight from the Tenno Lab in your clan's dojo. Obvious catch here though, you have to be in a clan. And some people take great offense in me recommending clan-exclusive things in beginner guides. And while I'm always open to justified criticism, I really don't see what the big thing here is. First, clans are available from Mastery Rank 2 already, so basically on your second day of playing. Yes, you might not have any friends clan to join, and I totally agree, it sucks to have to actively go out to strangers on the internet and ask them to join theirs instead. However, that's sadly just how the game is designed. Like it or not, there is no way around it if you want to have access to all the cool stuff. Gladly, however, Warframe players tend to be super friendly towards beginners, always willing to help out. If you go to the recruit chat and say that you're a beginner searching for a clan, most likely you'll receive mail within a few minutes. There are even big clans out there blindly recruiting anyone, no matter of level or equipment. And just in case you simply want to avoid any business with any other human being in this game, then just be open about it. If someone recruits for their clan, just tell them that you prefer playing the game by yourself without any commitments, and politely ask them if they would still be willing to welcome you to their clan anyway, so you would get access to all the clan exclusive equipment. We veterans know about how troubling it can be for new players to deal with the importance DE puts on clans. And I'm sure I'm not the only one out there who'd be willing to invite you anyway because of this very fact. So, long story short, you're gonna have to be in a clan sooner or later anyway, so you might as well already find one to get Zephyr. Or you want to find a clan for the next Warframe on our list today, which would be Wukong. Also acquired from the Tenno Lab of your clan's dojo, Wukong is like a Swiss Army knife on legs. A great all-rounder who will always find a niche to be of some benefit for you. His first ability, Celestial Twin, creates an AI-controlled clone of you with also the same loadout, effectively doubling your damage output, all the while taking 50% of the enemy's attention away from you personally. If you live in the middle of nowhere and struggle to find any lag-free lobby in multiplayer, this is the closest you'll get to a real buddy to play with. The great thing about your twin is that he only costs 25 energy to cast and will stay by your side indefinitely. Just one important thing to note here, while using weapons, your twin shares the same ammo pool with you, meaning especially on low ammo type guns like rocket launchers, you need to be careful to not run completely dry just because your buddy decided to burn through your entire ammo supply. So ammo conversion mods are a real blessing for any Wukong player. But we're just getting started here. Wukong's second ability, Cloudwalker, not only heals you and your twin, but also comes in super handy when you're trying to quickly traverse a level. I personally love running my Wukong in fast out type of missions like Capture, and I'm sure you will too. And with Wukong being one of the frames who loves to use all 4 of their abilities, his third ability, Defy, makes you temporarily invincible and blesses you with a huge amount of armor afterwards, turning you into a nice tank that also dishes out damage because your fourth ability summons an exalted energy staff with which you can turn your enemies into mincemeat in no time. So as you can see, Wukong is able to easily fill multiple roles at the same time. And what's even better about it, especially from a beginner standpoint, you don't need any advanced mod setup to make him work. If you want to use his staff to fight your opponents, go for some mobility strength, however, no need to overdo it. If you have duration mods, absolutely slap some of them on to reduce the energy drain per second while using the staff, as well as to increase the duration of your other skills. For survivability, you can skip over the shields part because with his armor buff from Defy, you're effectively a health tank, so better double down into vitality here. And just in case you happen to have some mod space left over after all this, more maximum energy with flow or some efficiency will never hurt anyway. But let's stop talking about clan exclusive Warframes for now. Even though I already mentioned that getting into a clan shouldn't be that big of a deal, I know you'd probably prefer not having to go through that right now. So the last 2 frames on our list today will not be from the dojo. And the first one of these 2 would be Citrine. Now, I know my last video on this channel actually was on Citrine when she was added to the game. It did get a lot of attention, and I was not necessarily nice to her in it. Consequently, many of you pointed out great pro-Citrine arguments that I just didn't see when I made the video, which I really appreciated. Regardless of all that, however, one thing I did mention in that video was that she would probably make for a pretty decent early game frame. And that's exactly why she's on this list here today. Now, the reason why she's such an amazing pick, especially early in the game, is that she solves 2 of the biggest issues every new player regularly faces. They don't have any reliable way of self-healing yet, and more importantly, in terms of energy economy, they have to rely entirely on drop RNG for energy orbs because all upgrades that would help with energy regeneration are still far out of their reach at this point. Introducing Citrine. With her passive ability, she constantly heals herself and nearby allies by 5 hit points per second that can be ramped up to even 25 by picking up health orbs throughout the mission. And while that's nothing to write home about in late game, especially on the early game star chart, 25 HP per second will probably out-heal whatever the enemies can throw at you. And even in the unlikely case that that's not gonna be enough, with her first ability, Fractured Blast, she throws crystal shards at enemies, which greatly increases the drop chance of both health and energy orbs when these enemies die. So just spam that at everyone and the entire squad will constantly be stacked with health and energy, which is exactly what you need if you don't have the means yet to take care of that by yourself. But wait, there's more. Her second skill, Preserving Shell, can grant you and nearby allies up to 90% damage reduction. Yes, you heard that right. You get up to 25 HP heal per second, receive a crap load of health orbs on top, and the damage you take will be reduced by 90%. Yes, good luck trying to die with that. Her third skill is nice, but I personally don't think it's going to be of much use for a beginner just yet. However, her 4 is always great, crystallizing nearby foes and granting you guaranteed red crits if you hit the crystallized body parts. To be fair, it takes quite some time to get used to it and also to sort of get used to having to aim for those crystallized body parts, but it's definitely great if you master it for cracking down on tougher enemies. So here's how you might want to play her. Spam your first ability to make sure the entire team is always well supplied with health and energy. Also try to keep your second skill up all the time for that sweet 90% damage reduction, and whenever a big baddie rounds the corner, slap him with your 4 for quick results. The great thing here is that with Citrine when it comes to modding, you don't need anything to make her work. Everything you do pick will simply make her more convenient. That being said though, Flow for more maximum energy would be nice to have, as well as some efficiency. Duration and strength would probably be your top priorities though, giving you more protection and higher drop chances for longer. The only problem with Citrine really would probably be her acquisition, because for all she delivers, unfortunately she's also quite time consuming to get. In order to farm her, you first need to finish the quest Heart of Deimos, to which you gain access, well, on Deimos. Afterwards, you'll unlock the Mirror Defense mission Tiana Pass on Mars. Now, you can either acquire all her blueprints in the C rotation in this mission, meaning as a reward after wave 20, but the drop chance for either of them only lies at measly 6%. So expect to run this bad boy for quite a while. Alternatively, however, these blueprints can also be purchased from OTEC in the Necrolisk on Deimos for Belric and Rania crystal fragments, which you'll also receive at the Tiana Pass Mirror Defense mission. Either way, you'll be spending quite some time there, but I'd say for what you get out of it, it's well worth it. But before we get to our last entry for today, who's your personal favorite beginner frame? Let us know in the comments down below. And last, but definitely not least on our top beginner Warframes list, we have our good old vampire lady Garuda. Why Garuda? Well, simple. Basically, for the same reason Citrine is so good. Garuda can self-heal and regenerate her own energy. Her second skill, Blood Altar, impales an enemy, healing a certain percentage of your maximum health per second as long as you're near it. That's very nice already, but combine that with her third skill, Bloodletting, where you sacrifice half of your maximum health to regain energy, and you effectively won't run out of either health or energy, like, ever. But that's of course not it. Her first ability, Dread Mirror, works a bit like Volt's energy shield when he carries it around and protects you from incoming frontal fire, whereas her 4 is great for slashing enemies into pieces. Speaking of slashing, in case you don't have a good melee, then Garuda has the perfect solution. Just don't take any with you, because if you rock Garuda without melee weapon equipped, she'll pull out her claws instead, which come with some very impressive stats, especially for early game. Garuda loves ability duration and efficiency. Having your mirror and blood altar up for longer is always convenient. Efficiency, in Garuda's case however, doesn't only affect casting cost, but also the amount of energy gained from her third ability when sacrificing her health. The more, the better of course. However, also don't neglect your ability strength, since it not only increases the damage output of your abilities, but also the heal rate of your blood altar. All in all, a healthy mixture of strength, duration and efficiency would probably be the most desirable for an early game setup. On the survivability side, health should definitely not be neglected with Garuda. While Citrine heals a fixed amount of HP per second, Garuda heals a percentage of her maximum health, meaning the higher that is, the more absolute hit points you'll regain. And at a whopping 300 base armor, Steel Fiber might also be worth going for to get a bit tankier. However, in the early game, that would probably be more of an afterthought for me if I still had more mod space open at the end. Sounds good? Then, time to get her. And here's again the critical point where some of you might say she's not really a beginner frame. However, I think it's not actually that bad. In order to get your hands on Garuda, you'll need to first complete the Vox Solaris quest in Fortuna on Venus for her main blueprint, and then you'll receive her components from different Orb Velis bounties. The thing here is that for the Neuroptics part, you'll have to go as high as enemy levels 20 to 40. Not really feasible for someone who just unlocked the second planet, I agree. I mean, how would you possibly kill enemies that high at this point already? Simple answer, you don't. Instead, run the higher tier bounties in a random squad and let someone else do the fighting for you. Now, bear with me for a sec here. I'm not trying to promote any form of toxic leeching here. Of course, you don't want to be a burden for your team. But truth be told, as long as you don't constantly die forcing the team to pick you back up, most players won't really care that much if you're doing damage or not. And what's more, if you run a frame that can actually provide value to the team beyond simply doing damage, say Citrine for example, your teammates will actively love you for it. So completing the higher tier bounties and getting the blueprints shouldn't be that big of a deal after all. Which leaves us with only one problem remaining. In order to build Garuda, you'll need 3,500 Kuva. Thing is, you won't gain access to a reliable source of Kuva until much later in the story, and in this specific case, even the taxi variant that I introduced in the Rhino section earlier won't work because it's a story-locked resource. Gladly, however, good old Blacky has a workaround. For example, Kuva can be acquired in small portions in even higher level bounties in the Orb Velis as well as on the plains of Eidolon. So you could theoretically go and run these even higher tier bounties with a team as well and hope for good drops. A faster, even though a bit costlier way however, would be the Nightwave. Kuva can be purchased in the Nightwave store from Nightwave credits, which coincidentally you already get once you finish the first level of each Nightwave season, that being really easy to achieve even for the absolute beginners among you. So, as you see, it will take quite some time and effort to get your hands on Garuda, but holy smokes is she worth it, and it's definitely possible, so don't neglect her all too soon. So now that you know the strongest beginner Warframes to look out for, you absolutely should not miss out on these top 10 beginner weapons as well. Thank you so much for watching, we see each other, hopefully in the next one, and until then, of course, and as always, good loot.